It's like, oh yeah, like, I think like we even probably took it as like a compliment, you know? Because you're like, oh, like my butt is like smackable for a guy.
Welcome to Society TV episode number 2. Here at Society TV, we want to be real, we want to be raw, we want to be relevant with issues today. So this episode, we've got something of a quite heavy topic, but I think it's going to be interesting nonetheless. But before we get into what we want to talk about today, let me introduce our guests for this episode, and ta-da, here they are. Say hello. Introduce yourself.
My name is Nick and I'm from Soziety.
Hi.
And you are a recording artist.
Yes.
Yes. He's a bit shy about that. What he's not shy about is how he stole this bathrobe from.
It was easy. I didn't steal.
You didn't.
I needed to clarify that.
Yeah. He doesn't want to confess his crimes on a camera, but yeah. So this robe, right? While it's fashionable, but does not quite belong to him. But that's okay. And then here we have.
Hi, I'm Sian. I'm a leader in nursery and I study fashion.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's get right into it. You know, today, the topic or the theme that we're going to talk about is actually sparked from what I was observing that has been trending recently online, what's been happening. So, at this point of time of this episode, what's been happening online, there's been a lot of people calling out other people on the whole area of consent. So basically, we all know what that means. I'm sure you guys know what that means, but if you don't, just a little bit of a context is that, well, there's been a bunch of girls, and I'm sure there are guys as well, who you've been posting using social media to call out other people how, you know, they've been sexually harassed, they've been just forced to do things that they're not comfortable with, and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's going to be a big topic, but let's talk about that today. So first up, I'm going to ask, I'm going to ask Sian this, right? Sian, have you in your own experience, have you experienced any form of a violation of your consent?
Yeah, I think the earliest memory that I can think of was back in high school, when the guys in my batch would have this game where they would run around on our floor and smacking girls' asses. And I think maybe there was like a scorecard, like, oh, like who can smack the most girls' butts and things like that. That's probably the earliest form of sexual harassment that I can think of. And probably back before I was serious with God, before I was serious about being a Christian and things like that, when I was in my past relationships. And then when I was with my ex, he would kind of like pressure me into doing, some sexual things that, I would say no, but then he would, keep on pressuring me and things like that. But yeah, I think those are like the two situations that I can think of as a girl. Yeah.
That's interesting, but yet bizarre at the same time. Because like, how would you and your friends, when you were in situations like that where you're getting like your bum smacked by all these guys, how will you all react? Like, how will you respond? How will you feel about those things? Were you actually okay with it?
I think we were, yeah. Like, because back then, like, we were all, kind of young, like girls are watching, like when you were like back in Form 1, Form 2, you were a little bit insecure and a little bit, didn't know your footing in the world. And like when things like this happen, especially when it's guys, especially when you kind of have that ideal in your head where it's like, oh, like boys are just boys and things like that. Whereas it's kind of like whatever, like, aside from like the bum thing, like even like they would like unhook our bras. I mean, I didn't experience that one, but like they would unhook our bras, but it was funny. So like when everyone is laughing, you're just kind of like, kind of thing. You're just kind of like, yeah, I guess that's funny. And like, I think that because like we didn't really realize that like, oh, like I'm being sexually harassed. Because, you know, like these are guys that you're going to school with.
Yep.
And you don't really hear the word like sexual harassment a lot, like when you're at that age, you know? Like when I was like 13 kind of thing, like you don't even know what sexual harassment is. So it's like, oh yeah, like, I think like we even probably took it as like a compliment, you know? Because you're like, oh, like my butt is like smackable for a guy or things like that. You know, where like you would feel like, oh, like, wow, like, thanks. Like, where you just feel like, okay, like I feel like validated. Kind of in a sense, like I feel like my body is accepted in your eyes, and like thanks, because I feel so insecure all the time. Kind of thing.
So I think two things that are happening right there as you were sharing this. What is happening is that from the early onset, certain behaviors or patterns have been normalized. And kind of like given the impression that this is actually okay, it's acceptable to be like this. And I think another thing that you kind of mentioned about how like getting all this attention, and that kind of like feeds even though negatively, but it does feed like your self-esteem, where you feel like, oh, you know, I'm accepted, you know, I must be. Because I remember, I mean, even though we were like a decade apart of our age gap right here, and when I was growing up in high school, I think we used to have this thing as well, where my friends would, you know, guys, they would rate like, oh, who's the hottest girl like in high school right now? Or then when there's a new player in the game, oh, that new girl, you know, she's hotter than the old one, you know, that kind of thing. So it's like we normalize these behaviors from an early age. And then at the same time, I think culture and society has somewhat molded us to draw our self-esteem or approval from what people say around it, especially based on external experiences, right? So that's kind of like probably why you guys just went along with it and you roll with it. But we're at this point now where we look back and we talk about it, we can kind of go like, hey, this is wrong, right? Even right now with the whole things that are getting posted online, a lot of people are saying this is wrong or that, but yet it seems to be happening so often, right? Even though it seems so obvious that it shouldn't. How do you think we can promote, for lack of a better word, a better understanding of consent and these matters? What do you guys think?
So for example, for girls, I think that it would be really important to identify the red flags in guys. So I think that, for example, like if you know that the guy makes really like perverted comments, like in social situations or like with you personally, like I think that's a really big red flag. I think like for example, like the small things, for example, like kissing. Like let's say if like you're not ready and you communicate with your partner, even though it's something really small, and if he's like, oh, but it's just kissing. Oh, but it's just like, it's so small, like, you know, kind of thing. But he shouldn't even be saying that. Like if you say no, that means like he'll be like, okay, like I respect you, and like I respect that, you know, you don't want to like keep going, you know. And one thing also I feel like another red flag is like how he treats his mom. So this is something that I learned from my grand uncle. He pulled me aside. He was like, remember like your future partner, like remember like how he treats his mom, because like how he treats his mom will be how he treats you in the future.
Wow.
Yeah, because even like how he treats like waiters, how he treats like waitresses, I think that's very important. Like how he treats like and even, you know, vice versa as well. Like how does he treat like service workers? Do they are they kind? Are they nice? You know, even how does he treat like your friends? You know, like is he kind? Is he compassionate to other people? Like not just to you?
I think what you're talking about reminded me of a video I saw of a video I saw on Instagram. It was this guy. He talked about how you should not get together with potential, but you should get together with patterns, or how when you see a partner, you don't just look at their potential, you look at their patterns. And that's so good, because like what you talk about is patterns. Like what sort of pattern of behavior they are cultivating. I think there's this other thing, like you know, this is other phrase, right? Simps, right? Like where, you know, people are simping and all that. It's so easy for before you're in a relationship, somebody will just show all their good traits, you know, all their good colors. But once you're in a relationship, and that's where a lot of their red flaggable attributes come out. But those red flags can also be seen in their normal day-to-day, like you mentioned, you know, the way they talk to their friends, the way they treat their family, those are patterns as well, which we need to be so aware of. I think it comes back to recognizing your worth and your value, right? And it's so important that you need to be secure in that, so that you don't just get into any relationship just because it's there and just because it's available.
I was like that prior to me taking God seriously. I was actually just getting into relationships because like, oh, I mean, that girl is cute. And like, we kind of clicked. But we never really we never really went in deeper in terms of our values and everything. It was all surface, very surface level. But then recently only, I think like last year, early this year, I kind of took God more seriously, and I looked at relationships differently. Like we have to have the same values in order for us to grow in the same way and all that. So it's not just, I guess for me, it's not just about looks anymore. It's about how you are as a person and what your values are and whether we can grow together or not.
That's awesome, because I think when we talk about consent, we can talk about it at like the surface level, right? So we can talk about respect, which is absolutely important. We can talk about your self-worth, your values, also equally important. But beyond that, it's how we view like sex, right? How we view relationships, right? Because I think it's so important to establish that, number one, the chief purpose of sex is not pleasure, right? It's not just pleasure. It's not just to be stimulated. But I think we're so conditioned and cultured that way that's how, you know, men behave, right? And that is what happens. And the other thing about relationships is relationship is not just about sex. Sex is not just a milestone that you achieve and that you look for in a relationship. And even beyond that, like you mentioned, right? Relationship is not just about companionship, but it's about building. It's about building together, having that same values. And I think that's so important. Building on values and not just on like surface things, right?
Yeah, I think adding to that as well, like I think before I was serious with God, when I was in my last relationship, it was very, very toxic, like extremely toxic. But I think like why it was so hard for me to like get out of it was because the relationship was so built on lust already, you know? So like it came to a point where it was like, I think if you've been in a toxic relationship, you'll understand where it comes to a point where it's like, it feels like kind of like there's no more love anymore, because it's like the way I look at you is like I can't even say you're a good person, or I can't even say you're treating me well, but because like we've already built this like foundation or like lust and like foundation where it's like, oh, like we're just here because of like pleasure and things like that. It's even harder to get out of the relationship.
I agree.
Right? Yeah, because like you get into those soul ties, like what we talk about, you know, in Christianity, and like why we don't have sex in relationships because of those soul ties. Because like, you know, like every time you have sex, you like form more and more soul ties. And it's very apparent because like, it's like a lot of people, like I've talked to people who like have, you know, like they have sex and they feel so empty. Because it's like they like keep like constantly giving their like that part of them away and away and away. And I, like, so like that's why I think like what we talk about, where it's like we as Christians, we don't like date non-Christians, right? Because of like the difference in values. Because like when you date a non-Christian, they do expect to have sex. Because they don't have that value, right? They do expect that. So it's kind of like, even when you talk about it, right? Even when you like settle like, this is my boundary, like it's very hard for them because it's like I don't have that value, so like why should I? You know, kind of thing.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, again, not to like ostracize or demonize like non-Christians, right? But I think ultimately, if your relationship, if your ultimate goal is not to get closer to God together and not to build on God, essentially, what else? There's very little else that you can kind of aim for, and almost like the next natural thing would be to just follow your instincts and to go like, hey, like that's so that's why a lot of people I think see sex as a milestone in their relationship. Like, oh, we've been together for a year now. I think it's time we're ready to do it. But again, there's more to relationships than just sex.
Yeah.
And in order to discover that more, you need to ask yourself, what are your values in life? What do you really believe in? Like even to ask yourself the right questions. Why am I here on earth for? And if we can't answer that, we should not even look at getting into a relationship, because I think relationships, a lot of people get into relationships trying to fill a void that they have, but quite often that disappoints. Like you said, you end up feeling empty and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and I think we kind of like started on this track of consent, but I'm glad we went down this path of like, hey, asking ourselves the deeper questions, about like our value, because I think once again, when you recognize who you are in God, when you recognize your true worth in God, you will stop giving people discounts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You won't be so quick to give away yourself and all that. And like pursuing God, that in itself is a value. And that takes a lot of intentionality as well.
It really does, yeah.
Think so?
It was a pretty hard transition for me, because for someone who just gets into relationships just because I think it'll work out, to someone that I am today, which is to intentionally get into this relationship to grow, and having this whole friendship stage where we just talk and understand each other. Yeah. It was quite a hard transition, but it was worth it, lah. It was well worth the wait.
Yeah. And that's awesome, because I think it's like you said, there's an intentionality, and we a lot of times we just do things like just because, right? But I love that, like how like there's a talking phase, the intention that you're building that life and building that values and all that. To just kind of like sum it up, I think we covered a whole range of things, right? We talked about how like number one, it's about there's a lot of things that have been normalized, but then because of education, because of awareness, we can now create change and to recognize that, hey, these things are actually not acceptable. As much as it has been constantly repeated, it is not acceptable to make certain jokes, to make certain comments, to do things, because it's all about respecting, right? It's about, we gotta respect one another. We are all people, we're not objects. But I think beyond all of that, we have to recognize, I think that's where our belief in God comes in. We have to recognize that that sex is not the end of everything, right? And our pleasure, our lust, and all these kind of things, it's not the end. It's not the chief end of everything. And I like how you mentioned, like when you're in a relationship, you wanna do things right, get in a conversation or that. So I feel like I need to add that there's actually nothing wrong with wanting to be in relationships, but you just gotta know why you want to get into a relationship. So consent is kind of like almost like, okay, it's all here, the surface thing, but when we look at the deep root issue, it's all about having the right perspective about one another, having the right perspective of one another, that we are all people, we're not just bags of flesh, we are all people made in the image of God, right? There's a sanctity to that. And when it comes to sex, there is a role and there is a purpose of sex, and it's not just for pleasure. You mentioned soul ties. I mean, that's a big topic that we can talk about already, right? But in essence, sex is not just a physical act. It encompasses spirituality, emotions, and all that kind of stuff, right? And at the end of the day, it also entails, right? Like consent, right? Sex, also relationships. How do we view relationships and the purpose behind relationships? So well, that was already a loaded a topic today. I hope this helped you in some way. And again, what we have here, we're not offering all the answers, but hoping to create more avenues for conversation. So if there's any way we can carry on this conversation, let us know. Maybe DM us or comment on this video, and we'll see whether we can do any sort of follow-up if we need to. But for now, Thank you for tuning in to Society TV episode 2, and this is
Society TV.
Oh no! No, I was gonna go. This is Nick and Sian Bai. Okay, but anyway, we'll try that again. And this is
And
yeah. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Right, take care. God bless. We'll see you again soon.